The 1315th day of the war. In Belgorod, there was no light, but dozens of thousands of people remained, according to yesterday. Also, the details of the Ukrainian attack on the energy infrastructure became known, a direct strike with American weapons. Recall zero hysteria in the White House, that is, words about Okozoko are not just words, and a reserved reaction from Russia, that is, they understand that you will not do anything special here. Orbán confirmed that Hungarian drones flew into the Ukraine territory, which the country previously denied. He also began to say that Ukraine is a country without sovereignty. Apparently, ahead of the elections, the main corruptor of Hungary decided to make a bet on a Georgian approach, repeat Russian propaganda completely, and scare everyone with war. Usually, this package also includes a falsification of the elections. We'll see where this road takes it, but Russian allies have been not very lucky in executing their plans lately. Russian aircraft were shot down by a FPV drone. This is the first time this event has been confirmed from the moment it hits the ground. Drones pose increasingly a threat to classic equipment, and not just on the ground. But as you can see, in the air, the pace of the Russian offensive in September has dropped by 2. Russians resorted to Pokrovsk and Konstantinovka with only a few noticeable successes in just a couple of directions. Z channels continue to whine, and the people are doing the wrong thing, and the command was broken through by another large Z channel, which had previously been braved incredible successes. It's invented, but still. Wearing Kotenok wrote a solid text on why in the Russian army things are going F***CKS, and the situation is becoming worse and worse. By the way, 2 lists of killers of Ukrainian civilians have been announced. Russian commanders leading the murders in Buda and the vicinity, and the command of Russian long-range aircraft still being killed by Ukrainian missiles have been announced. Let's move to the self-propelled words. Ukrainian missiles are also hitting Russia. It turned out that an electronics plant in Karashivo has been hit by a Neptune. Ukraine has not yet released its Flamingo, which is apparently being taken care of in case of expansion of energy strikes. Russian soldiers leave their children alone under the threat of being sent to the children's home. Viktor Orbán, years after unruly sons, risks assaulting them despite his injury. Overall, as always, what was fought for was fought back. All this and more in today's fresh update, which you can keep to your likes, comments, and subscriptions. These actions help promote the video, and your subscriptions are especially important for YouTube's algorithm. Now let's move on to what happened in the past day. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán admitted to an invasion of Hungarian drones and stated that 2 or 3 of them are not something Ukraine should worry about. He mentioned this in the Karkasak Orai podcast. Probably that's how it's said. According to him, Hungary does not plan to attack Ukraine, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky should more care about the situation in the east. The question is whether 2, 3, or 4 Hungarian drones flew through it. Let's say they did a few meters, as the Hungarian Prime Minister then said. Orbán also rhetorically asked what Russia could have spied on Hungarian drones at Zakarpattia if the front line were in the east of Ukraine. Ukraine lost part of its territory in the war with Russia and the Russians. Its sovereignty ended there. We are holding the rest of the territory. We must be serious. 2 or 3 Hungarian drones are not what Ukraine should be doing. These are not its enemies, he stated. Here's the problem. Earlier, Sergei Flashby-Skresnov stated that this evening, after the flight of Hungarian drones into the territory they inspected, a Russian strike occurred. Let me remind you of Flash's post. This evening, my friend Sergei Gerasimuk recorded activity on the air of unclear UAVs over Zakarpattia. We urgently had to go there with equipment, then once again. Colleagues from different departments at the time were somewhat skeptical about this information. UVA, Russian Armed Forces, Nadmukashivo. Yes, but I reported to everyone who could. Sergei too. Then there was a strike on the electronics plant, and it became clear that there was no accident. Now the president announced it officially. So, as you can see, there's a strange situation. Hungarian drones come, investigate, and then in this place, a Russian missile strike occurred. Believe it or not, it doesn't look very pleasant for the Ukrainian side, and moreover, basically, to understand which country is Hungary. As for the fresh case, according to the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, the preliminary talk is about intelligence, the industrial potential of border areas of Ukraine. In addition, as you remember, several Hungarian spies were previously captured, who spied on Ukraine's industrial opportunities. Also, Budapest limited access to a number of Ukrainian internet and media, including sites TSN, Hramitskoy, Ukrainian Truths, and others. Well, that is not some marginal, separate channels, but across the entire Ukrainian media. The minister of the Hungarian Prime Minister's office, György Gyula, stated that this is, so to speak, the answer to the actions of Kiev, which earlier blocked Hungarian resources, arrogant and Democrat for spreading Russian propaganda and material about Russia. What can be said here? Well, that is, in my opinion, Orbán took the course on such a Georgian scenario where, in fact, the Georgian dream, financed by the Russians, having nothing to do with Russia, just peddled the topic of chose us, or there will be a war. They actively did all this and falsified. In fact, they falsified. The scale of the falsification in Georgia was quite high. Will it work in Hungary? Will it bear fruit? The strategy chosen by Orbán? The question is open. Relatively soon, and of course, many are hoping that Orbán, a corrupter, has already been found his castle, had a beep scandal with his party. Perhaps someday we will talk about Hungary with you in detail. It's not my full topic, but I fully agree because, essentially, only Hungary remains an ally in Russia. There's also Slovakia, but Slovakia is flexible. If Hungary doesn't, it won't do anything to Slovakia. Of course, Orbán poses a direct threat. This story of Hungarian drones hitting Ukrainian territory and the arrival of Russian missiles is quite specific. So I quite assume that if this kind of thing continues from Hungary, these drones will simply collapse first, and then there may be some kind of escalation. If you look at Hungary's story, it's quite cyclical. In Hungary, be careful how to phrase it. Hungary often wanted to recall its glory and often wanted to give way. In Hungary, Hungary often wanted to give way. 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 Hungary, the whole story, the whole story, the whole story, the whole story, the whole story. MIS Chinese letter. Eventually it ended very badly for her. Well, we'll live, we'll see. Again, the country is not an expert on my field, so I'll look at and study. The material, it's interesting what is being written about it, but of course, these statements of Orbán about Ukraine losing its sovereignty are very interesting, against the backdrop of the fact that Slovakia, Hungary, constantly says that without Russian oil, things will be very bad. It completely depends on Russian oil, so it will never give way. And for those who call it non-sovereignty, we are used to hearing good words from Eastern European partners, Ukraine, and many don't diverge from it. But here Bitely brought in an intruding speech by the Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk, on the Warsaw Security Forum. I want to read it to you because I also agree with it completely. This is also our war, Tusk said. We often hear voices here in Warsaw and in many other places around the world that say, this is not our war, it should not concern us, let them kill each other and solve their problems. We don't want to pay, we don't want to spend our time, we definitely do. Want to risk the lives of our soldiers. But we must realize it's not about love for Ukraine or someone's good or bad historical experience there. It's obvious, it's about solidarity with the country being attacked by the aggressor. It's about security, the survival of Western civilization as such. This is our war, because the war in Ukraine is only one part of the horrific project constantly reborn in history. Its goal has always been unchanging, to enslave nations and deprive them of their freedom. This is a war, today. The greatest goal, the most important goal for all public leaders is gets ill. Deep conscious in the minds and hearts of the entire Western and transatlantic community that there's a war. No one wants it, it's strange in some places, it's a new type war, but it's a war. That's exactly how it is. The faster everyone on the European continent understands it, preferably beyond it, the lower the likelihood of a major physical war. Closing eyes on a problem is the right way to scale it. Unfortunately, we have historical and empirical experience that clearly shows that only timely detection and solving the problem allows us to avoid destructive consequences. Not much is for sure about the war that is not ours in any way. Yevgeny Prigozhin, to his surprise, turned out to be the more effective manager of the armed forces in Africa than the Russian Ministry of Defense. The African Corps, established by the agency Wagner, instead, has failed in a number of military missions, mostly training local units, and lost a number of businesses, including gold prospectures. It has reached the point where conscripts in Central Africa are once again appeal to the absent image of Americans and French people in order to secure security. Russian influence in border areas of the state of Sakhalin, such as Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Sudan, as well as in the Central African Republic, weakens, writes Wall Street Journal. After Wagnerovitz, led by Prigozhin, thanks including to his brutality, has become a threat to the region, Russia's actions in it have worsened over the past year, experts say, and officials responsible for defense, who the newspaper talked to, say. According to the African Center for Strategic Research, in the past year due to the Islamist rebels in Sakhalin, almost 11,000 people died, about half of them killed in the battle. I wouldn't emphasize the previous governor's talents here. The thing is, during his term in Africa, local al-Qaeda of the Islamic State didn't face as much of a serious threat as it is now. Right now, the Hunt's policy of the supported Russia has brought the people to such an extent that Islamists seem more acceptable to many, as it did in the same Syria back then. Of course, the brutality of Russian mercenaries who cut out entire villages has its role here. Meanwhile, local residents can hope for relative security if they strictly hold onto the channels of radical interpretation of Islam. But such a punitive counter-terrorist policy began precisely when Rosrezerv was accused of cutting into Mali in 2022. Again, let's remember that the only working method of fighting terrorism in the Kremlin arsenal is to find a combatant who is talkative and pay damage to him, and there are apparently no Kadyrovs in Africa, so these are another failures in Vladimir Putin's international politics. Yesterday, I briefly reported on the strike on the electronics plant in Karashivo, Bryansk region. Now some interesting details appeared. This message was published in the Ministry of Military and Marine Forces, the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Let's correct the work of defense plants of the Russian Federation. Last night, our Neptune clearly worked on the Russian Karashiv plant's electric detail, minus another link to the enemy's supply chain. Everything that works against Ukraine will be destroyed. Neptune is perhaps the most verified component of Ukraine's new missile arsenal, which I've told you about recently, and which will be increasingly used in various objects in Russian territory. Apparently, such targets have not yet reached Russian air defense, so bright visits to Neptune and other missiles are ahead. On the morning of Monday, September 29, a Ukrainian drone fell on the territory of Lokomotiv in the city of Belgorod, according to the Astra source in the Russian Emergency Ministry. The drone fell on a fuel tank but did not damage its harassment. After the strike, the territory was taken out and Russian employees took care of cooling fuel tanks. There were no casualties. A very strange phrase for which I don't quite understand what is meant. If fuel tanks weren't broken through, why cool them? Overall, interesting. We're noting the fact of the strike. It's unclear if there were any consequences. We'll expect new sources of data and satellite images. In Feodosiya, in annexed Crimea, they noticed black smoke near the oil depot. Local channels reported it. Earlier, there was drone danger announced over the peninsula. Nevertheless, authorities reported a fire in the oil depot in Feodosiya due to welding work. This was reported by an advisor of the so-called head of the annexed Crimea, Oleg Krychkov. Disruptions are being made about Russian refineries, he said. There was claim that a fire occurred in an empty fuel tank and the remnants of nitrogen are burning. Even if that's the case, still, it's not bad when in Russia, in occupied territories, a fuel tank is burning without Ukrainian interference, primitive, so to speak. Although we remember where the meme about smoked ships appeared, because in every attack, official authorities claimed they smoked in the wrong place. These are debris from the same series, so maybe they're trying again. No, they didn't, they built it themselves. Enough to smoke, where did it hit? Smoke over there, where else didn't hit? And now, details about the attack on Belgorod. During the Ukrainian Armed Forces attack on the Tver, 4 missiles hit the city. HIMARS destroyed a base, a building with gas turbines installed. The main station core also caught fire, Astra sources reported in emergency services in the region. Energy generation was halted. Tver only works to supply hot water. Another HIMARS strike, or rather the JMLRS, hit a power substation in the village of Blizhny Gumenko in the Belgorod area and damaged the LAP transformer. That is, let's note, the American HIMARS is firing on objects of energy infrastructure, and in more than a day, no one in Washington has brought an eyebrow. If this is not confirmation that the White House has approved the Okazaoke strategy, then I don't know what kind of confirmation is needed. According to the master, after the strike on the Tver, more than 20,000 people were immediately left without electricity. After that, more than 160,000 residents remained without light to power the main substation. Also, after the strike, more than 1,800 transformer points of 610 kilowatts began to be left without power. Some of the alarm systems and traffic jams stopped working. According to the governor, yesterday, 77,000 people still did not have light. Disruptions were also recorded in the power supply, and water supply to 10 regional municipalities. This is, as you understand, only the beginning. Well, that is, if Russia continues and it continues to hit on Ukrainian energy, then strikes on Russian energy will increase and scale up. Ukraine has the opportunity to make these strikes. And obviously, there is agreement of the United States on the fact that such strikes can and should be made. Before we move on, I remind you that you can support this video with your like, comment, and subscription to the channel. All this is available to you absolutely for free. In general, please do this. This is very much to help the spread of the video. But you can also support the channel financially. The link to Patreon in the description. There we have some bonuses for Patreon. Subscribe to a certain level of support, get access to the chat for Patreon, your name at the end of the video. If you haven't seen your name, by the way, it should be write to me on Patreon, please. I will do everything because we do not update so often. These things are not enough time for this. But I hope that streams for patrons will appear again soon. For now, things aren't exactly working out. Again, I'm running out of time, but I believe the day will come and we will return to these streams. I already have something we need to watch on these streams. In general, there are plans, Patreon link in the description, and buy NVPN, a tool to bypass blockages that allows you to bypass blockages. Well, that is, you can normally watch YouTube, call by Telegram and WhatsApp, including your relatives. You can use Discord, go to blocked media. In short, use the internet normally, rather than press Putin, who believes that you do not need internet. Well, because he doesn't need it, so you don't need it. He went to his ass, buy NVPN and get access to the normal version of internet. Well, this supports the release of new videos on the channel. Remember that buying VPNs and using them in Russia are not forbidden yet, as well as that we have a VPN comrade which allows you, while abroad, to go to Russian sites, government services, MOSRU, and all this nonsense. Sometimes there is such a need to look at documents and so on. The VPN comrade is also by the link in the description, and we are moving on. As you may remember, a week ago, Ukraine struck 2 oil pumping stations at the Kuyibyshev-Tikhoretsk oil refinery in the Oligar region. The aftermath of one of them was the Zandvatka station and the Dnipro-Asin-Harbaz project. According to Planet Lab's satellite images, we captured a complete destruction of one of the buildings on the NPS territory. It is likely a station management point. Reservoirs and other infrastructure were not damaged, i.e., there will be something to work on, they announced. A full list of Russian military criminals and their information can be found on the BIP website. The main intelligence directorate continues to systematically document military crimes committed by Russian servicemen during full-scale aggression. One of the key factors is the identify and appointing of specific individuals responsible for massive missile strikes on Ukrainian cities, the death of civilians, operations carried out by Ukrainian forces. Destruction of civilian infrastructure, the Ukrainian ministry noted. From February 24, 2022 until August 31, 2025, the army of the aggressor state, there were launches of 2,354 missiles, such as the KH-555, KH-101, KH-55SM, aircraft the Tu-95MS and Tu-160, which launched the 321st Cruise Missile KH-22H, 32 aircraft the Tu-22M3, as well as the 171st Air Ballistic Missile 9S-7760 Kinjal of the MiG-31K. Aircraft, the KH-101 cruise missile was targeted by the Akhmetit Children's Hospital in Kyiv on 8/07/2024. The targets for Russian war criminals were hospitals and children's houses, schools and universities, multi-apartment houses and power plants, victims and thousands of Ukrainian civilians. Among the recruited criminals, Lieutenant General Kabalash Sergei Ivanovich, Commander of the Air Force and Deputy Commander of the Air Force of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. General Mayor Kovaldin Sergei Genadevich, Commander of the Deep Air Force and Deputy Commander of the Air Force of the Russian Armed Forces. Colonel Shevel Sergei Viktorovich, Chief of Staff and First Deputy Commander of the Deep Air Force and Deputy Commander of the Deep Air Force of the Russian Armed Forces. Major General Oleg Pichela Vladimirovich, Deputy Commander of the Deep Air Force and Air Force of the Russian Armed Forces. Militarny separately reminds that in January 2025 in Russia was blown up the commander of the missile division of Russian Armed Forces, Eskinder, involved in the mass suicide of civilians in the village of Grasa. At the scene of the explosions, he received severe injuries, of which he soon died. So at the scene of the commanders and pilots of the Russian Deep Air Force, I would at least tense up a bit. And it concerns not only them. The Times called the names of 13 Russian officers suspected of war crimes in Buch. As the British newspaper notes, journalists confirmed the officers' names using translations of official announcements about suspicions made by Ukrainian prosecutors, documents delivered by the SBU and the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine, as well as interviews with Ukrainian officials. Times also checked the data using images and videos received from investigators and lawyers, as well as information published by Russian soldiers on Russian social media. Astra writes, retelling the results of the Times investigation. Against 8 of 13 officers, the Ukrainian prosecutor's office filed an accusation. It is also reported that more than 80 Russian soldiers under their command have officially become suspects in committing crimes in Buch. The list is headed by a journalist commanding an eastern military district. At the beginning of the full-scale invasion, Colonel General Alexander Cheka, his possible involvement in military crimes in Buch was reported earlier. For the first time, the Times article points out 5 names. The agency reported, Colonel General Valery Solachuk. According to the Times, he commanded soldiers accused of murders. As the newspaper notes, this year Putin raised his rank. But the details are unclear. At the start of the full-scale invasion, Solachuk led units of the 36th Army, the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine reported. Intelligence claimed that his subordinates were involved in crimes against civilians in Kiev region, without Buch's mention. For some reason, neither the Times nor Astra is mentioned, but Buch's ranks eventually increased. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, Solachuk now commands the Central Military District and its group, Military Center, leading advances in the Pokrovsk direction. Call Andrei Kondrov. The unit's leadership are accused of robbery and killing civilians, the newspaper writes. He commanded the 5th Tank Brigade, which was established by lawyers after analyzing Russian military documents. Informally, Kondrov was not accused. General Major Vadim Bankov, according to Times, he allegedly ordered the killings of 30 local residents and forced the civilians to clean the bodies of the killed Russian soldiers. The details are unclear. As the commander of the 45th Separate Air Assault Brigade, he commanded a failure landing in Gastomel. On February 23, according to the total, the soldier received general ties. Colonel Yuri Medvedev, his subordinates committed over 40 rapes. Medvedev himself died in 1922. He was killed by the rebellious Russian forces, the publication writes. At the time, they reported that one of the soldiers drove the commander back as a tank to take revenge for his losses. Western intelligence confirmed this report, and at least one hero was awarded the award. Whiskey Times was also nicknamed Colonel Sergei Karasev. According to the Ukrainian prosecutor's report, he beat a woman with a crowbar and shot a civilian. I hope all the heroes will receive their awards. You know, I've seen so many times how semi-anti-Russian, and not just them, are fully confident that some monstrous things the Russian army did only in Buch. This is not true. Buch was only the first confirmation when it became clear who Ukraine was dealing with. And then, from many other settlements that were liberated, absolutely similar information came. Testimonies from graves where the elderly were burned to death, for example, with their family. The Russian army does this everywhere, almost everywhere. This abuse is widespread. There wasn't a single Buch. And this is an important understanding because defenders of our boys and other degenerates usually say, well, yes, I don't know, some separate unit, something like that. No, this is, unfortunately, mass violence and the most monstrous thing that happened in Mariupol, still under Russian control. As long as civilians died there, it's still clear, most likely dozens of thousands, because the graves that had to be dug by the remaining residents of Mariupol, which Russia didn't allow to evacuate, firing at green corridors from mortars, were seen in satellite images, just like in the palaces, a whole number of people buried there. And I think that when Mariupol will be free, it will still be a separate, monstrous story, if, of course, Russia won't be able to wipe out all traces by that moment. But I think a lot of horrific witnesses remain. I hope that every so-called hero will find his award. Of course, everyone will be loyal to the fair and honest court, but if not, the award will find them before the fair and honest court. In the form of a bike, in the form of an explosions machine, in the form of a rally of his subordinates, in the form of some random, it would seem, thing, some poison or something else. It can only be welcomed. These people should not remain alive, at least in their freedom. Do you remember when we discussed the monthly data of the Russian offensive in Ukraine once a year and the pace of it declining, or, God forbid, declining 1.5 to 2 times? Well, as Ukrainian volunteer Sergei Prichula says, the day has come. The Russian army has captured 225 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory since September 28, according to the Ukrainian military project Deep State. This is almost 2 times less than in August, when 455 square kilometers were taken into control of Russia. This reduction in the pace of the offensive indicates stabilization of the front, according to military analysts. The Russian army has captured over 129.5 square kilometers in a month in the southern section of the front, primarily along the border between Dnipropetrovsk and the Zaporizhzhia region, south of the Donetsk direction. Another 82.5 square kilometers were taken in the northeast of the Donetsk region near Slavinsk, the Lyman direction. These two directions became the main targets for the Russian offensive in the past week, September 22-29. In a week, Russian forces captured 5 square kilometers in the southern section of the front and another 12.3 square kilometers northeast of the Donetsk region. In addition, Russian forces increased the service area, which is not controlled by any side, in the Kupiansk area and in the city itself by just over 100 square kilometers. In a week, Russia managed to occupy 63.5 square kilometers of territory, almost the same as a week before that, 65. A double slowdown as of now indicates a serious change in the situation on the front, said military analyst Kirill Mikhailov. This is due to stabilization of the line of contact in all directions, except for Limansky and south of Donetsk. Residents of the conflict intelligence agree with this assessment. Russian tactics of infiltration into rear areas with small groups have prevented operational successes from being observed and emphasized in favor of Russian forces. According to CIT representative Konstantinovka Pokrovskaya, Russian forces have come to these cities, persistently defended in Ukrainian forces. In addition, a new Ukrainian defensive line is playing a certain role in slowing the offensive, as the expert noted. According to him, they began creating at the end of 1924, primarily in Donetsk region. It includes a large number of small strongpoints, rake and wrought fiber. At the same time, I want to note one unpleasant call at the junction of Pokrovsk and Toretsk directions. Deep State reported an advance in Russian armed forces near Poltavka, which is not fully occupied this settlement. Yesterday, I shared with you with Mashavets forecasts that the Russian Naval Infantry Group will make its main efforts here, attempting to reach Konstantinovka and Druzhkovka from the west. Supposedly, Russia has successes in the Lyman direction and in Dnipropetrovsk region as well as in Kupiansk, emphasized the conflict intelligence team. At the border of Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhia regions, Russian forces are advancing using superiority in live force, explained Kirill Mikhailov. Russian troops continue to advance in Serebryansky forestry and in the area of the village of Yampol, about 14 kilometers northeast of Liman. Here the Russian army threatens to occupy the entire left bank of the Zherebets River, reaching northwest of the city of Siversk. Additionally, Russian troops are trying to bypass Liman from northwest, aiming to reach Sloviansk from a far-fetched perspective, added an expert. In Kupiansk in September 1.5, Russian troops managed to reach the city center and capture no less than 2.5 square kilometers. However, the successes of Russian troops in the city were not as significant as reported by the Ministry of Defense, which showed, first of all, the capture of two-thirds of the city and in general, the arrival of the Russian troops in the center of Kupiansk. Well, how to tell you there was an arrival, was there a fortification? Here is the question, because, well, Yuri Podolyak, the blogger, also showed like what is happening with these groups that put the flag there and then the drones put it there, you see, so there are a lot of gray people in Kupiansk. Obviously the city was not so well ready for defense as I would like, but nevertheless talk about control. Control of Russian forces, some significant territories except from the northern outskirts, is quite not difficult, but we will wait for new information and what will happen in Kupiansk with Ukrainian troops and with Russian troops. It's time to draw attention to the fact that the number of Z-Patriots in the Telegram adds disproportionately to the pace of Russian advance in Ukraine. Yesterday, I literally published a video about how the Z-Patriots almost agree with Trump that Russia is a paper tiger and cannot do anything on the battlefield. And then post by war correspondent Yuri Kotenko arrived, which apparently is back in the lunar phase and where the Russian command shouts, says this Z-Patriot.
А в СМИ пиарятся битвы за избушку лесника, что, мол, с Великой Отечественной сравнивать стыдно. Отвечу брюзгам так: повоюйте сами, получите свинца в тело, попробуйте, окунитесь с головой, если повезет, выживете, только тогда получите право на негодование и критику, и то дозированно.
And for another Z-Patriot, sometimes so many of our guys are sent that any words for that are a pitiful 3. We're moving as we can, crawling with concessions and refusals. In some areas, the enemy counterattacks and push something away from us. And that happens, the war. In our rear, many still don't know that on a few directions the enemy has a limited advantage over people, sometimes greater than both UAVs and drones, and that there's a lack of live forces. Open your eyes, those who think the war won't end in success are waiting. At best it won't end, it won't end. Well, it won't end, it won't end. The choice sooner or later will have to be made, either for the homeland or in the Stata Sadoma, closer to Pugalkin and so on, with Zemfir in Shokolad. I repeat, the choice must be made for everyone, not only personal but also in terms of the state's efforts or fight for the real, full or no fight. Here, by the way, I can't help but note that, in my opinion, the choice between war correspondent Kontinkov, Zakhar Pralpin, Beep, Dushalin, Vladimir Putin, Galkin, who has an illusion, Zemfir. Saddam, who apparently believes that everyone can love whoever wants without looking back at the state policy, seems to me an obvious choice for everyone, right? Well, as if there is nothing at all. Well, like, here is your choice. Who would you choose to devour a huge bunch of beef or a 3-bedroom apartment, I don't know, without a mortgage? Well, a strange choice. Well, okay, it doesn't matter. We will continue without his country's fantasies. But the last one is, how is the question of the war correspondent just about to fight to the full or not to fight? And this is capitulation, gentlemen, comrades, with all the excelling. Now, from the particularity of Kopchem, we have an extremely many problems. But the main one, in my opinion, is that the state machine as a whole has not been restructured into a military plan. Separate sectors, yes. Fences, workshops, enthusiasts, husband and wife, grandmothers, flying nets, yes. And as a whole, there is none so far. The problem lies in the catastrophic bone where unfavorable retrograde military systems that simply don't allow Russian warfare to fight for real. And the point isn't even that our brave armed forces can't protect the peaceful population. That's exactly why everything exists. Real problem is the categorical unwillingness to change the military government system. Faces change like decorations, losings flash, a pretty phrase for TV and media, while the will to leave everything behind is, there's none, and the answer to the question, how to change the situation personally. Come out yet, he writes. You know, when Z patriots write about war for real, I always think, okay, you've been fighting for 3.5 years, you've lost all Soviet equipment, you've shriveled the economy, and you have over 1 million killed and wounded. And the killed among them, well, 300-400,000 most likely. Is this not real warfare? The largest war in Russia's history since the Great Patriots' War, the largest number of killed, the largest number of use of weapons, all this is not real warfare. How is it actually done? So far, there have been no 27 million killed. That's no war, right? We're coming close to that number, not a specific number, but a number. In a year or two, Russia will start fighting. Again, in 1 million killed, 1/26 of the losses in the Great Patriots' War are the largest war in human history. The Second World War was the largest, but you understand what I'm talking about. That's why I'm interested to know, do they ever fight for real, or do they offer a nuclear war so a couple of billion people are killed immediately? Is that right or not? So I would be interested to see and explain this war for real, because we have already heard from Vladimir Putin that we have not yet started and all that, but as if the state of the economy, the state of the Russian army from the point of view of the military-industrial complex and equipment and the spent resources on it, and in fact just the destruction of the own tank potential, the destruction of all its artillery reserves, the destruction of all its air reserves. Yes, which Russia has, with which Russia now has a problem of losing strategic aviation. This is it. They didn't start everything right, and what it looks like when it starts. I just would like to understand, yes, the mobilization that continues to work, yes, 300,000 people were gained from it, but they do not let anyone from neither contract soldiers, nor volunteers, nor mobilized people let anyone go because of the mobilization. It all continues on the outskirts. It turns out, it's interesting about the families of the deceased. It means that it's all on the outskirts. It's interesting about the mother who gets a zinc grave with a person inside. Or rather, it's not clear with the person. Or not, so there are usually pieces of meat that it is normal to identify. It is impossible. She knows that in fact we did not start anything, that this war is on the outskirts. I do not talk about Ukraine, which Russia is trying to destroy. No, from the point of view of the Z-men, it is interesting how all this looks. I would look at the meeting of the war corps Kotenok or Vladimir Putin with 1,000 or dozen thousand mothers of Russian soldiers who died, so that they explain to them that it is not really all real, it is all on the outskirts, and imagine the mothers of all, well, 300-400,000 Russian soldiers dead, so that Putin becomes in the center and they are around him, and so that he says, yes, we did not start anything, we're still, I think even despite the whole threatening, despite the whole state of the Russian society, but it is right there that it will explode. But no, Putin will never go like this, he even feared during the mobilization to even go into the public field somehow, well, in the sense of the active phase when people were taking it. Remember, it disappeared for half a year, it was cancelled in the straight line and all that in general. Yes, that's why we haven't started this thesis yet. It of course looks like some copy. So you can think, no, but in fact we still have something there, in fact we just haven't started it. It's not us who's being played, everyone's feeling it, it's just that we haven't started it, some Z war correspondent thinks. This is how it almost no one can imagine. Well, I don't know, write in the comments what you think, how Russia can really start the war. Well, the 1st Battalion of Unmanned Systems Kazaka, Vysot, the 59th Separate Assault Brigade of the Unmanned Systems Forces just started and showed a video of the defeat of the Russian helicopter Mi-8 with the help of FPV drone. Riddle to M8 with the help of FPV drone. Listen up, the beep for $500 destroys, well, just a very expensive equipment. Also in the battalion's channel, they presented a video of the fall of the helicopter and shooting of a burning machine on the ground from another drone. In this project, Cyberborshnaya geolocated the video in the area of Andriivka, close to the line of combat contact on the Pokrovsk direction. Russian military lawyer Alexei Zemtsov claims that the crew managed to land the helicopters and infantry was evacuated, after which the M8 was already burned to the ground. According to him, he posts a video of the tough landing of the helicopter. Later, Zemtsov admitted that the death occurred in the M8 cruise. Apparently, this is the first time a Russian helicopter has been destroyed after a drone attack in the air. No, there have been hits, but at least this is the first video where a helicopter is beautifully burning on the ground. The only thing left is to celebrate with peace of mind and hope it will be scaled up because, well, killing Russian helicopters with FPV drones, well, what next? I don't know, kill Russian submarines with submarines for $100. Well, not for $100, what, 300, 400? Well, how many FPV drones should be gathered? Well, it depends on the expert, but it's quite cheap. The father of the contractor who signed the contract was sent to war after his son. Now the 53-year-old volunteer with a shattered hand and the condition of Bekhterev are wanted to be sent to the meat assault. Anatoly Novikov, born in the 72nd in August of 1924, signed a contract in Krasnodaria, got into the military unit 42600, 110th Brigade, 3rd MSB, from the firing battalion. Though he wanted to help his 25-year-old son Vladislav, who signed the contract during the pass of the emergency service. But meeting with his son, who is now fighting in the Kharkov direction, has not worked out, says Astra and the serviceman himself. In November 1924, during the assault on the Ukrainian city of Kurakovo, Novikov was injured in the right hand, crushed several bone in the arm, tore the tendons, there was a contusion, as a result of which the hand is practically non-functional. The wound intensified Bekterev's condition. No pill was prescribed, so he asked for a neurosurgeon. The neurosurgeon's investigation showed consequences of contusion, so he was sent for investigation. I have rashes in the lumbar, neck rashes, and Bekterev's condition appeared. Now they don't allow me to go to a military medical commission, so they transferred me to a combat battalion and sent me to the LBS frontline. So what if one arm doesn't work? What if I can't run, wear an armored vest, lift heavy web, eat meat? No laws are written for them. Says Novikov. At that, the man passed a military medical commission only on September 26, 2025, almost a year after service. The investigation was carried out thanks to a lawyer. However, the next day, without the soldiers' rank set, they were taken to a combat unit, though they were supposed to be sent to hospital for treatment and medical confirmation. With the help of a lawyer, after a long effort, he passed a commission at the military medical commission where they said they would be sent to the hospital Russia. They don't count the NRT and they will be treated there. But the leadership decided it different, and the next day he was sent to a combat company, saying, "You are healthy. There is nothing new about him at the VVK. At the moment he is in the 110th Regiment, first in the SB, first in the company, preparing them for the assault," said Novik Tatiana's wife. In her words, he is not the only prisoner being sent to the assault, said the Deputy Chief of Staff, Kapitan Yershov. Not one of them, even those who are already in the category, are waiting to be confirmed that everyone is being prepared for the assault. What kind of lawlessness? Just a prisoner being sent to the death when nothing else comes to mind. The medic of the company said if everyone is brought in, it means they are healthy and not at the same place. What problems do you have? Tatiana retorted. According to her, even though he is a professional driver, Tatiana already sent an assault unit, but she started writing complaints to the President's administration, the military prosecutor's office, and the Russian Ministry of Defense. The military department said they'll conduct an investigation into the military unit, asked the commander to eliminate violations. However, for now, he is preparing for a combat mission. And you'll say, like, the story is a bit dramatic, right? Like, you went to get your son for the war. But it's like there's no sense, you know, like you went to get your son for the war because they wanted you to be stretched out in another unit, and you simply went for the meat. It's probably easier said than done. It's like your father-in-law got him, didn't he? He's a real father lover. He might as well try and take his son back for the war, legally, steal, desert, and so on. When you just go and sign up for the war, go nothing, leave. No trace, your wife won't just lose her son, she will lose you too. Don't be an idiot, guys. Like if he says, I want to destroy Ukraine, or I want money, well, he's just a degenerate, isn't he? And here, when you said, for the sake of your son, why did you go to war? For what? Like, look, my son, they'll screw me too. Like, what's the point? So yes, think about what you're doing. If any remnants of the mind remain, it's real concern for your children. You can't let them go to war, it's real concern for them. You have to take them with you. But it's not heroism or concern at all, you just went to war too. That's quite strange. Children of a serviceman from Buryatia may be in an old-fashioned home after the death of their father at the SVO. Maria, wife of a missing serviceman, was born in 1987, born in Ulenyud, Republika, Buryatia, and reported that children and soldiers are being sent to a children's home. On July 15, 2025, Sergei stopped going out on communication and reports from the military unit that he was recognized as a missing person. Tutkin served in the 143rd Motorized Rifle Regiment. The woman reported that she brought up two of Tutkin's daughters, Seleznyov Karina and Alexina. According to their birth, the father was unregistered. After Sergei's disappearance, the children went to a rehabilitation center and are formally owned by the children's home. The woman reported that she temporarily removed the girls from the family, but they are denied permanent care in the formation. According to her, the National Defense Fund refused help by assigning Sergei the status of missing person. She notes that because of that, the children are legally considered alone, remain without material and legal support, and the situation itself has become serious stress for them. The defense refused help. The families appeal for assistance in arranging care so that the children don't go into the children's houses, and they ask for assistance in finding a fighter. Maybe someone heard about our father. Maybe someone can help find him. Another story about fathers and children. Don't go to war, don't leave your children. Be like this, the state will send you away, the state will send your children into the children's home, where they will have, as you understand, very sweet life. Love yourself, as they say, and your loved ones, and don't do all sorts of beep. Don't become fascists or occupiers, don't join the Russian army, and if you do, then run. Run through the forest, run through the I want to live moment. Run because there is power, because nothing will remain of you. There's no feat or heroism in making or not, and it can't be. It's exactly the opposite. Your children will curse you not only for giving up, but for being part of this fascist occupying army. This was Michael Nacke with you, and until next time, all the best, goodbye.